And for me, I feel like when we're expressive, not only are we more open
Mm,
with with each other or with other people, but we're also freeing ourselves from subconsciously kind of burrowing that
mm.
deep into our heart.
Welcome to Share.care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
Hello and welcome to the Share.care podcast. Our belief is that global peace starts at home. Feeling safe, valued, and heard gives you a foundation to confidently step out and make the world a happier and safer place for everyone. Because in today's world, it's in your own interest to help others. And today, it is my great pleasure to welcome Justin Ericson. Now, Justin has over 15 years' experience assisting people in their recovery through various addictions that held them back. And also, he's the author of Till Death Did We Part, which is available on Amazon. Welcome, Justin. Pleasure to have you on the show.
Oh gosh, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Fantastic. Now, one of the things and the traditions that we do in this show, to start with, we jump in the Wayback Machine. Now, you might remember this. It's a silver DeLorean that Doc Brown invented from Back to the Future. And when you hit 88 miles an hour, you can travel through time. So can we jump in that? I'll let you get in the driver's seat and we can hit, you put your foot down, get to 88 miles an hour. I'll hold on in this passenger side and we'll travel back to, a time when, something, where you actually, had some experiences, some challenges that you went through that were pivotal to you doing what you're doing now.
Wow, that's a really good question, very deep question. I'm traveling right now, and just give me a second to arrive at my destination. In 1998, my grandfather passed away, and um, he was one. I don't come from a very strong family. It's not a weak family, but we're not very close. But with my grandfather, I always revered him. And Roy Erickson was his name, and um, it really allowed me as a 10-year-old boy to step back and evaluate my friendships in life. It actually opened the door to me wanting to sometimes scratch the surface beyond friendship or get to know my friends on a more personal level other than just seeing them at school or just hanging out with them from time to time. And I think that was the birth of me just really wanting to get to know people beyond the surface. Um, so I would probably start with that. And I think growing up watching TV shows like Touched by an Angel and watching some Hallmark movies and movies of inspiration that have fed my soul, because I react to them emotionally, it always just gave me a reason to want to help people.
Mhm.
Um, and I can think of one show in particular, Extreme Makeover, right? Where that was a terrific show on ABC. And every time I watched an episode,
Mhm.
I would be bawling because this family or these people really deserved what they got. They got a beautiful home,
Mhm.
and it just wanted me to help people, whether it be with their mental health or keeping them accountable or being in the medical field and being hands on.
So from that experience, when you think about through that and the emotional experience that you went through, because there's a lot of talk out there today with men that they shouldn't cry and shouldn't show emotions, which I
Mm.
personally find a little weird because I remember when I was growing up, um, I used to watch the wrestling, which is, I'm a lot older than I look. And back then you had Macho Man Randy Savage. Now, and then the name was in there. It's Macho. That's his middle name. And I remember watching an interview, and I've actually found the interview. And this was back in the 80s. So, I'm dating myself here. And the interviewer asked him, he said, your middle name's Macho. Does Macho Man cry? And he said, Macho Man's cried 1,000 times. A real man should show the full range of emotions. How do you reconcile that? Because I look at that and through my experience growing up and things that I've done, I've always been around people that could express their emotions, that could, when I'm talking people, I'm talking guys, could express their emotions, could say what, ask for help. What's your experience been in that category when you said you're watching TV show and you're crying, and I can relate to that experience. I've had that. I was in the Cars movie when the original Cars movie came out, and there with my son watching that, and there was I can't remember what the scene was now, and I'm sitting there in my eyes, I'm bawling my eyes out because I thought it was just there was a moment there that just really touched me. What have you noticed in that space?
That I'm more connected to my soul, and if I wasn't, I wouldn't react emotionally at the particular moments in my life that I do. And, it's interesting because you're right, to echo what you were saying, there is that mindset that fathers should be kind of the military, buck up, don't cry, get over it kind of individual, right? And for me, I feel like when we're expressive, not only are we more open with each other or with other people, but we're also freeing ourselves from subconsciously kind of burrowing that deep into our heart. And because I've seen that time and time again with people, is that with men is well, and some women too, that instead of talking about their feelings from an honest perspective, it just down the road it's weary on your mind. It's very, in your loneliest moment, what do you think you do if you don't ever talk about certain problems that you were never able to overcome? Well, you think about that and you replay that in your mind visually, and it can be damning. Absolutely.
Because I do wonder where we've got to when we look at society now, and we're more connected than we ever are. And COVID, for all its negative things, and there were a lot of negative things about COVID, but you and I are talking. You're in the United States and I'm in Australia. We're having a conversation. I have lots of conversations like this now, which probably wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for COVID. So, and people are more and more connected with social media, with the technology available. We're more and more connected, yet people feel more lonely than ever before in history, is what the reports show. What do you think it is that makes us feel more lonely, even though we're more connected?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's pivotal to figure out where your soul's going. And I think to connect to a faith, even a religion, that can really help provide that structure and that moral compass and that guidance for your soul. But instead, especially here in the US, and I'm not sure how it is in Australia, but I'll speak on behalf of my country, that, we've really utilized our energy for overworking ourselves at work, for the spirit of competition among others, and we've sacrificed that, and you can sense it. You just go out to the grocery store, and you get that energy feeling, that aura from those around you sometimes, and it's really heavy sometimes. So I think that has a lot to do with it. I think also, with everything going up in cost, it pressures a lot of people, especially single parents, to kind of calculate how they use their time. Yet some of them miss that mark of being one with themselves, of being open, expressive, really looking at someone when they talk to like their child or whoever. I think there's a lot of negligence. I think, especially with the political climate that's currently in our country in the US, I think there's just a lot of tension. And when you have that much tension and that much negativity, you're intentionally not making room for for you and your good mental health.
So this part about making room for you, first, I mean, when I come back to what you talked about, faith as well, because I resonate with that, which certainly share.care does. We have 10 principles to follow, and the second one on the list, not that they're really in any order, but is strength. Find a source of strength. Where do you turn to for the light in your darkest hours? It might be a God, it might be spirituality, it might be music, it might be poetry. How much is that, finding that source of strength, because you mentioned about that, finding some faith, how much has that played in your life when you've had dark times that you've had to work through?
Oh my goodness, great question. Well, right now, for me personally, the bridge that connects A and B is music. And um, I remember I was suicidal many, 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 many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost killed myself. And it was during my relationship with T. And I popped in a CD from Evanescence called
Mm-hmm.
Fallen.
Mm-hmm.
And just hearing her for the first time, because it was a new CD, and I just thought, let me just pop this in while I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
The music, you can hear her heart and hear her pain. And it gave me that subliminal message of, I guess I'm not the only one. So music for me is certainly that avenue that I always take. Another component connecting those two for me would be being at the water. I believe in the elements. My zodiac sign is Libra, so it's air. However, I tend to respond more towards water, and so what I'll do is I'll go to the ocean for a few hours or some sort of form of water, and just really kind of be quiet, listen, reflect, and focus. And so if I didn't have those two, it wouldn't be impossible, but it would just be definitely more challenging for me.
Well, from that perspective, you've got to be fair too. I mean, if you're looking at it at a molecule level, I mean, there's one oxygen and two helium atoms in, so there's a gaseous state there, which kind of relates to air in a way. So maybe
Oh,
that's the
yes.
connection.
Could be. I never thought of that before.
But I love what you mentioned there about you were listening to the song, and I love that song myself. We've got a radio station that we're launching soon, or Share.care has its own radio station where we have a lot of interviews on and people sharing information through their own podcast that they repurposing as shows on a radio, which is really cool. And then I've got another regional station that we're launching soon as well, and it was actually this week I was uploading songs from Evanescence, so it's ironic that you brought that up.
Oh, wow, I just got chills on my spine when you said that. That's what a coincidence.
Yeah, that's why.
And congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. No, it stood out for me.
You're
That
welcome.
it was really that was really cool. But what I wanted to tap into what you said there was you said listening to the song, and it is a very powerful song. I completely agree. But you got this feeling that you're not alone, and because she's talking obviously about dark emotions and this trauma that she's going through, if you want to use that word, which I just did.
Yes.
But you mentioned when we were talking in the pre-show, one of the messages that you wanted to get out there was that you're not alone. And I wonder about that because, and I have a lot of pop culture references, so you have to bear with me on that. But
Of course.
the movie Crocodile Dundee, there's a scene in that movie where they're up in the big apartment. I don't know if you know the movie or not, but and he's an Australian outback guy that's come to New York City. And so it comes from this really small town of like 10 people in the outback of Australia, and he chases crocodiles, and the lady that comes and interviews him out there, then she actually invites him back to New York. So here's this outback Aussie in Australia, at this high class party, and they're talking about things, and they talk about a psychiatrist, and he makes a faux pas about calling him being nuts, that kind of thing, and being a nut, New York being a nut house, but he goes, that's why I fit in, because I'm a bit of a nut myself.
Are we all in some way?
Yeah, exactly. But they're having a discussion a bit later. Him and the female protagonist are having a discussion about this, and she goes, because it's like a psychiatrist, and it's like someone you go out, to let your problems out to. And she says, "Oh, you probably don't have a psychiatrist at Walkabout Creek." And he goes, "No, in Walkabout Creek, if we have a problem, we tell Wally. Wally tells everybody else, no more
Mm.
problem, because it's brought out in the open." Is it, part of that process that we've somehow lost this ability just to talk about things and have these conversations?
I do believe so. I think there's been so much noise that we've been incredibly distracted from
Mm,
that. Um, and when you're more emotional than logical, um, when something tragic happens or you have some sort of element of surprise, oftentimes that can lead to dangerous decisions. And I know I've had to really train myself on not being 100% emotional, and it's hard, but it's something you have to work at. You have to kind of sit back, take a breath, and say, "Okay, hold on. This is something traumatic. What can I do to, like, how bad is this?" And I evaluate and do all the things. So, but yes, I just to re-mention what you said, I think it's definitely something important to consider.
mhm,
Even though we're busy, busy, busy all the time,
mhm,
it's further corroding and degrading us as people, and it's really sad to see. It's really sad to see, and the best thing people like us can do, and your viewers, if they're on board, is just to be that example, be the light. Sometimes it takes more than just a glass ceiling to crash or to crush.
mm,
I could be a very stubborn person at certain things.
mhm,
So, you know, if your pride isn't too high and your ego is not an unhealthy level, then there's a chance that you can feel so much more better by expressing, maybe calling a friend, or even just journaling. I mean, I'm a huge believer in writing down thoughts and dreams. I'm a
mhm,
huge believer in dreams. Um, and so yeah, it's just all about how we manage our time. It really is at the end of the day.
mm. Now, we are going to have to cover off because, the internet can be a very toxic place with a lot of people voicing very strong opinions. Now, I'm picking up from our conversation that you haven't watched Crocodile Dundee now. So to stop the mail coming in, you're going to have to make a promise that you're going to go and have to watch Crocodile Dundee. You're going to make that promise?
I make that promise; it'll be added to my queue.
You'll love it. You have so many different quote lines to draw from. You'll really enjoy it. It's a classic movie that still I think is the all-time best-selling movie coming. Oh no, Mad Max was, but I think it's the second best-selling movie to come out of. Sorry, let me correct.
Oh, I can't wait
That
now.
Mad Max was the most profitable movie in the world for such a long time until I think Blair Witch. But Crocodile Dundee is the highest grossing movie to come out of Australia. So and you'll love it. And there was 3 sequels. I think it's a 4th sequel. So anyway,
Well, awesome. Well,
you'll love it. So okay, so we've
I
covered
can't
that
wait to
off.
check it
Okay,
out.
we're not going to get the mail in. That's good. That's fantastic. So talk about your
Absolutely.
experience helping people with because you said you've got 15 years of experience helping people with various addictions that held them back.
Mhm.
How did you get involved in actually, taking that step into helping people?
Man, it always starts with one thing, always first of all, and that's being a friend to them. That's
Mm,
that's being able to meet them and not judge them by any sort of opinion.
mm,
Um, and that's where that foundation is, at least for me, when I would be in the medical field. And I mean, I've had a large array of individuals with PTSD, bipolar, physical ailments as well. And I think and also working at a mental health hospital in
mm,
Washington State, working, and monitoring what's called DTO, I'm sorry, DTS, which is danger to self. So it's
mm,
suicidal, if you will. Um, Now, some of them, of course, require a lot of medication to kind of dummy down their personality and character, but there were a good portion of those that just needed guidance, just needed someone to listen to, um, take them to their appointments, really care for them, And you don't have to have a license for that. You don't have to go to school for that.
Mm.
This could be your neighbor on the left or the right. It could be for a complete stranger you met getting dinner at McDonald's for all you know. It's the opportunities are always available for us. Um, and with that said, obviously, you want to weigh out, say, sometimes you could be in a rough area. I'm not suggesting that you help people downtown day after day, a
Mm.
large array of people, because you'll be exhausted. Um, but what
That
I am saying
analogy where
is
you've got
that,
to keep, you've got to put your oxygen mask on first. You've got to make like on an aircraft. You've got to help be able to make sure you maintain your energy to be able to help others.
well, absolutely. I think RuPaul said it best. When RuPaul said that, if you can't take care of yourself, how the hell are you going to take care of others?
Mm.
And that's so true. And I think for myself, it's just natural for me to want to help when there's a problem or consult someone. Maybe if they're, I've had nights of going clubbing in Seattle where I'll get out and I'll see a fight, you know, in the alley, and it's like, you have, on those particular situations, you have to kind of evaluate the risk and just kind of get a feel of that, and if it's something that you feel you can actually make a difference on, and not get injured. So, um, so it's a constant balancing act, I think, with people who just want to give, and um, you know, it's just, I think it's just about balance, really.
Yeah. But if we take that a bit deeper, what is it, do you think, that drives you to want to help? Where did that come from?
Self satisfaction. I mean, like I said, I'm a very in tune person, and nothing gives me more joy than to make someone's day better.
Mm.
Whether it's a silly joke or whether it's maybe giving somebody a ride, it's just that personal satisfaction of just knowing that without you, they couldn't have gotten their plans done today or whatnot.
Mm. That giving
100%.
component, we know, from research, although I think it was pretty obvious you didn't need to do research, but we know that when you give, it actually makes yourself feel better. And we talk about that at the start of the show. It's in your own interest to help other people,
Mm.
because you do get dopamine. I mean, I understand they need to do research to work out that you get dopamine rushes and things like that from it, but it makes you feel good. Is that, when you look at how that affects you, it sounds like you get a lot of satisfaction and that feeling of feeling good. How do you explain that to other people that might be going through an addiction or something like that? That actually getting out and helping others is a good way to feel better. And the analogy that I have for that was, I remember a long time ago, I was sitting in my car playing I was single, playing a tape that was something along the lines of "Why Won't Anybody Love Me?" And that was back in cassette days in my car. And I'd hit rewind, play it again, crying my eyes out. 2 weeks
Oh,
later,
wow.
I went out and helped a charity that had this massive, dinner for homeless people. It was a lunch, and they had this big tent in the park and put out. And I went and helped and volunteered and helped there, and I just felt really, really amazing in myself. And all of a sudden, that was okay. And when I think back at those experiences, one, I was thinking of the first experience was me thinking about myself and why isn't it, why am I suffering, so to speak. The second one was looking at other people suffering, going, how can I help? Two different things. How do you share that with people that might have been through an addiction to go, hey, or feeling, that self-loathing, to say, shift that focus and to put it to other people, to want to help other people?
Well, first and foremost, nothing happens on accident. Every single thing, whether it be positive or negative, happens for a reason.
Mm.
And so I tell people, perhaps, that, I have a friend right now who is in recovery, and she's doing a fantastic job being sober. And I told her, I said, Lisa, I'm maybe one day, you can actually make speeches and
Mm.
you can influence other people who haven't really got on the same level as you.
Mm.
Um, And I think it's just one of those things where, um, you know, it's okay to not be okay. And for that particular phrase, to elaborate, I think when you are just at your rock bottom and there aren't any resources, there isn't really a lot of help.
Mm,
Um, I think it's at that time that, dare I use the word selfish, but I think it's appropriate to be selfish, to nurse yourself back to health
mm,
on every platform, emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. Um, and at the bare minimum, just mentally. But I think, um, again, I think it's just something I encourage. I think everybody has a story. I think if we heard from more people, whether it's one on one or whether it's in a group setting, of some sort of a transformation to a better him or her, I think we as a people would be much happier in life. And
mm.
we're always searching for that next fix. And instead of taking a break and sitting back, it's like, oh, what can I do now? I too, I can be impatient myself, but I have to kind of sometimes buckle up and say, okay, hold on, wait a minute, yes, this is probably going to taste better if I put it in the oven versus the microwave. So I'll wait the extra half hour. Okay, for example.
I like that
I know
analogy.
that's a bad example, but
Yeah, I would
but
struggle with that one if it was that was the choice.
no, absolutely. I've been there too. Um, but again, at the end of the day, it's just about what you want, and it shouldn't be about what anybody else wants. And
Mm,
for me personally, being a proud gay man, especially now, I want my voice heard in the
mm,
movement. And I want, especially the younger generation, to know that there's nothing to be afraid of. Like,
mm.
everything's going to work out, and we're fighting for you. And I think that's important, especially with the trans spectrum of the LGBTQ.
Mm,
Um, so I don't know. It's just who you are. I think is the best answer. And can we tweak our personality? Can we change our character? I think we can make modifications. I think with work we can alter certain ways about
mm,
us, but we, at the end of the day, the majority of us is us. If
mm.
we're authentic in care in conversing with others and representing ourselves.
Yeah, I think my experience of working with people, yeah, I would say yes, you can change your character, but very few people do. Um, uh, but moving on from that, you mentioned in listening to you talk about that, because you touched on a couple of things, or one of the key points you mentioned in the pre-show that you wanted to cover was that that there is hope. Um, Which again, I love your that you're talking about, because Share.care is a global organization sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
Oh, awesome.
How, when you're working with people, do if someone's again in that dark moment, that fallen moment with Evanescence playing,
Mm.
and how do you give them hope that there is a brighter future there? There is something to look forward to.
Great question, as they all have been. I think for me, it's about the first impression. Um, when even the first impression at the situation, when you have somebody who has fallen in some way,
Mm,
I think two factors play out specifically for me is that eye contact with them, but
mm,
two are follow up questions to what they say, to
mm,
how they may express how they feel, because it then kind of gives them um, the notion that, oh well, gosh, he does sound invested. He does sound like he wants to help me, or she does seem like she wants me to get out of this rut.
mm,
Um, so I think for me it has to do with both those two. And and it's something I've recently kind of improved on the past 3 or 4 years, is with my inner circle. Like, um I never used to really ask too many follow-up questions to serious things that they may be going through. Like I wasn't a standoff person at all per se, but I would just be one of those people that would rather sit back and hear from them and just to agree with what they feel they would need to do. And with age comes wisdom. And I think we
I
all know
hope.
that. We do hope. Yes, I shouldn't speak for everybody.
I know some people
Um,
that are older that I question if that
uh,
statement would be true.
me too. Gosh darn, me too. But yeah, I think it just has to do with that, and just being that example again. I know I keep going back to that, but just
Mm,
being sincerely wanting to hear them
mm,
and listening, eye contact, just really kind of nailing down what they're saying. Maybe they need to explain a little bit more from what they said, or you just have questions or something sidestep to say that may make them chuckle. So it's all about impressions. Now, with that said, you know, if you are in a heavy addiction, sometimes that can be not received
mm,
by the sender, right? Where it, I don't want to say it falls on deaf ears, but they're so enticed with their current form of addiction that it does go in one ear, not the other with so many people.
mhm,
And um, but otherwise, I think it's extremely beneficial. It's effective,
mhm,
and because I know what that feels like from my inner circle, and I want to replicate what helps me. And I know that's what helps me is you give me your undivided attention. You tell me as a friend if I'm making the wrong decision,
mhm,
right? Because friends just don't always. I don't feel like friendship and loyalty are stuck like glue. I think it has to do with constructive criticism at times between your friendships or your relationships, whether personal or even professional.
mhm,
Um, and I think love is that whole umbrella.
mm.
I really do. I really do. That's just the one thing I've always believed.
Yeah. With that, when you're dealing with people as well, there's two components I want to cover up, but I'll do them separately. One is listening. I'll come back to that. But I wanted to touch on the point you were talking about there, where you're talking with people and it goes in one ear and out the other. I'm paraphrasing slightly, but you used words to that effect.
Hmm.
And I was talking recently to a neuroscientist who explained the way our brain works is that our perception is our reality. It may not be the reality, and you see that all the time in people talking that and they're presented with actual evidence that says no, what their belief is not correct, but they will stand by that, and we know that people will fight for their beliefs even if they aren't correct. Um, Even when seeing evidence to the contrary. How is it when you're having that discussion with people, especially when you're dealing with people that have that the addiction, to actually break out of that and go, oh, hey, maybe I can do something different, or maybe there is a different reality here. Maybe I can, rather than hitting the bottle or whatever it might be, there's another option to address this particular circumstance. How do you open that door?
Well, gosh, I think it depends on the person to whom I'm speaking to. I think it depends on how I can redirect or de-escalate their anger or their depression or anxiety. I think it's a case by case basis. I really do. Having been through it myself, I can tell you. Uh, you know, I remember my parents at one time when I was in a relationship with T, which I talk about in my book. Um, when they told me that I should break up with him, when they told me that, um, when my friends told me the same thing, I sacrificed them. I sacrificed my friends because, in the name of love, I pledged allegiance to this man.
Mm,
So it took me to ride through the mud to finally get it.
mm,
And one thing, and I say all that to say this, is that with with my friends, if they're going through a patch,
mm,
a down a spiral, if you will, um, I always say, and I believe this to be true, and I want all your viewers to hear this, is that, you know, and now I just forgot it. Sorry, 1 second. I just forgot it. Oh, some of the best lessons learned in life are learned the hard way.
Mm,
Some of the best lessons learned in life are learned the hard way. And um, I'm living proof of that. I've certainly made some decisions I'm not proud of. I know we all have, but um, especially me with my relationships.
mm,
And I needed to fall myself to learn that.
mm,
And now I use that and I look back at my shoulder, and what I see is a lesson learned that, okay, well, obviously I know not to do that again. I know to better screen
mhm.
romantic partners in a man. And it really cuts a lot of work out. It really does, because you're doing all that homework
You're
before the
pre-
initial.
you're preaching to the converted here. I learned,
See, there you
I
go.
learned too late in life that no amount of skill fixes a poor partner choice. Um, it was just,
Ooh.
yeah, it was something that I learned much, much, much later in life, having been in a marriage that was very uh, challenging.
Hmm.
Let's just say, given
Sorry to
it's
hear
a
that.
public forum. So,
Oh, of
but
course.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, out of respect for the other person as well. And it's one of those things. Just because you don't agree doesn't mean that makes the other person a bad person. And I certainly don't have any of that animosity there. But what I wanted to look at with that is you talked about learning the hard way, and I've pondered this a lot because a business partner of mine, she talks about, and she said to me, and I love this quote, which she said, "You learn through pain until you learn to learn through joy," which was brings me back to that first point I raised about listening. How often, when
Wow.
we look at it, do we go, okay, if we actually listened to what someone was talking to, it took that wisdom on, would we avoid some of that pain? But it's just through that stubbornness. And you mentioned stubborn, and I can, I think if you look up stubborn in the dictionary, is a picture of me. Um,
Oh
how
gosh.
Yeah, because I mean, some of the hardest lessons I've learned was purely, if I'm going to be honest about it, was because I was too stubborn and didn't listen to people around me. And I learned through the pain. Whereas if I had have actually just listened, took a step back and went, "Hey, yeah, I can learn this way as well." Do you think it's necessary that we have to go through the pain, or do you think we just put ourselves in that situation? And that was coming back to Share.care's first principle, which is, it's not in any order, but the first principle
Yeah.
we have is responsibility. You're responsible for your own actions, and accepting responsibility puts you in control. And there's a quote that we have for that, which is from Sophocles, which says, "It's a painful thing to look at your own trouble and know that you yourself and no one else has made it." Um, how much, when we look at that, do we go, okay, this learning through pain, yeah, we did it because we weren't listening, but we can actually learn through joy if we want to.
I think one of the highlights. I'm trying my best to answer the question. I just feel, though, sincerely, that when you go through it yourself in your own way, in your own stubbornness, and then you learn,
Mm,
it's set for life, that you'll never go back to that, because if you've been through enough gunk from your choices, from your personal decisions. Um, However, I would feel that I think great people who are receptive are the ones that maybe don't learn life's hardest lessons the hard way. I think they make it through joy. I think they make it through um, absorbing information like a sponge, being open, not being so stubborn.
mm,
So, but I really think I think it just depends on just that particular individual, as far as what they were, who they were raised with, and what kind of character they are as well. I think that's crucial towards that. But I do lean towards life's hardest lessons can be learned the hard way is a guarantee that it's something you would never, number one, go through again once
Mm.
you climb out of that hole, but two, that you would tell others your your example. Maybe they're on their way to the same hole or whatnot, and the same pitfall that would get themselves back to ground zero, and it could influence them. I've had friends that have thanked me for sharing, my story, my particular story, to whatever they particularly were going through.
Mm.
And but no, I think you can also learn through joy. And I love how that's said. And I'm ashamed I haven't really read the principles yet of share care, but I'm super excited now to check out the others for sure.
Well,
Because that's
there's
very
10
powerful.
yeah, there's 10 principles we have, but also too, we took it to a high level and we thought, what if there was a guiding set of conduct that we would adhere to? And we actually went back and we thought, where do we draw this from? Where's the inspiration? And we drew it from the medieval knights code, the code of chivalry, and we draw a lot from
Hmm,
that. And one of the codes is to laugh at yourself and not take offense at the opinions of others. And we've got a bunch of codes there as well, like that, to guide you in those situations. So, which helps in that situation. If someone's riling you up, well, part of that is, and I in my corporate part of my life, we have a high level negotiation program, and one of the tactics is to get people emotionally um, wound up, because then they become, more manipulatable. And when I say that, the
hmm,
intention is a win-win outcome, but you also too want to maximize your return as well. So people that aren't as emotionally controlled, and that's what we say, well, don't take offense at opinions of others, because that's the intent in that example, is for people to get you off guard and maybe take advantage of you. So that's one of the things.
absolutely.
Bit of reading there for you as well. You might enjoy that.
Thank you. Thank you. No, absolutely.
But if we're taking that a step further, because I'm looking at my notes here as well, and staying with that listening part of it, because it sounds like when you're dealing with people and working with people, that you are quite open to listening. And I'm relaying that from my own experience. Certainly, when I was younger, listening was not. I knew everything. You weren't telling. I knew, and I was pretty good, so I didn't have
Yeah.
to. But there's a limit to how far that goes. And the start of this year, now we're nearing the, well, we've certainly passed the middle part of the year. But at the start of this year, it's, at New Year's, it's time to set those New Year's resolutions. And I was looking at the start of this
Mm,
year going, yeah, I've got my intentions set, I've got my goals set. I don't really need any. And then I was having a discussion with something, and listening came up, and I went, actually, that's a good point. And that, it
mm.
wasn't a suggestion for me. I believe I'm a pretty good listener, and said I wasn't. I learned to
What's that? No, I'm just kidding.
be. Exactly. That's the point. Why aren't you listening to me? Um, you know, but so what I did was actually I said, because I was inspired by, I remember hearing about the person that won the World Toastmasters Championship, and as walking to the airport after winning that competition, went into a bookshop at the airport on the flight home and bought a book on public speaking. And when he was asked, you've just won the World Championship, he goes, well, you can always be better. And that's, from the conversation we're having about listening, I said,
Mm,
ooh, what if I make my intention, one of my New Year's resolution, that even though I'm a good listener, I will listen more? Because how often have you been in a conversation and someone's talking, and I've done it heaps, and you're thinking about what you're going to say next and not really, listening? How
mm.
much do you think that is really critical when we're talking about, social media and people feeling more lost, lonely, and not useful? How important is it, do you think, now that we actually everyone needs to just take a step back, and rather than blurting out stuff, go, hey, maybe I'll just listen for a moment?
I think it's extremely important. I think it's extremely needed. I think it's extremely not applied right now, presently. Um, and I guess when you were talking to me, I was affiliated with Toastmasters. It's so funny. Um, but when you were talking to me about that, I was reminded of the D word, the diet, right? Where I would, I've, I'm a bigger guy, and so I've been on a lot of different diets and whatnot. But when I found the perfect diet for myself,
Mm.
and I started seeing the results, it made me want to naturally want more results, and that required more, say meal prep. It required more planning,
Hmm.
and so just to kind of mirror that situation with the Toastmasters champion,
Mm.
I think seeing that before and after, and
Hmm.
I think it also has to do with some healthy comparing. Maybe perhaps looking at a speaker, say a TED Talk, for example,
Mm.
and saying, I can probably be at that level.
Mm.
And you will want to naturally want to gain the resources to get you to that level. Um, so but I do feel it's very, very important. And when you get to start that off with a little bit of faith,
Hmm.
maybe trusting that person who may be trying to educate you, if you will, or offer some sound advice or wisdom. I think starting off and applying that just in faith, just to see if it makes a difference, will certainly influence you on maybe you just naturally wanting to continue that ladder and climb up that ladder. Um so I yeah, so that's what I would probably answer that question with. 100%.
Yeah, and when we're looking at that, you're talking about these steps that you're helping people to go through on a road to recovery from addictions.
Hmm.
How do you build in a component of getting the small wins? I mean, we look at, say computer games, and I played a few when I was younger, and there was always, you got these little rewards, little Mario, the little plumber going through, you get the gold coin, and you get these little dopamine hits. How do you incorporate that from, when you're working with people to actually, get those small wins and to not only get the wins, but to celebrate them? Because a lot of times we can have some really, really bad self-talk. The way most people talk
Mm.
to themselves, they would never talk to their best friend that way, or even, probably a good friend that needs help. So how do you get people to make that shift to actually talking in you know, um, an uplifting way to themselves?
Yes, well, you mentioned about the small wins aspect, and I think a lot of it has to do with patience of maybe incorporating who they were before this dilemma
Mhm.
overcame their lives. I think trying to get them to reflect back what it was like before they started,
Mhm.
is a self victory. I
Mhm.
really do. But I want to be careful and say that, none of this is for selfish ambition. I think there's just a lot of, you know, good intended good people who are who have great intentions. Sorry, I'm getting my words mixed up. Um, that have that.
Mhm.
And as far as the second part of your question, I think again it just boils down to just being an example and not just talking. You have to be it. I think our
Mm.
actions will always surpass any amount of words we use.
Yeah.
Um, and we have to practice what we preach. I know that's an overused, washed out statement,
Called
very
cliches for a
Pentecostal.
reason.
Yes, and with respect, but I think we can talk, but without actually having any sort of actions to what we're saying,
Mm.
really doesn't validate us at all. I really
Mm.
don't. You
And what
know.
about our focus on objectives when going through that phase? And I'll liken this to, I think we've all had that experience where we've lost something and we're finding it, or while we're finding it, and we look in the most ridiculous places like the freezer and,
Mm,
all different places like that. And it's places it's never going to be in.
yeah.
And then we find it and it was sitting on the desk right in front of us the whole time. And that's your reticular activating system working, and you focus, you notice what you choose to focus on, coming back to what we're talking about with the neuroscientist earlier. Um, you know,
Hmm.
we see what we want to see. And I know from my perspective, I mean, I've never done any hard drugs or anything like that, but I have smoked and I have drank. There was a time when I was younger, I was drinking 2 bottles of vodka a day. I'm Polish, Russian, and Ukraine, so I have that excuse.
Oh,
You know,
wow. Yes, you can take a lot.
um, uh, it's but
Yeah.
I'll use smoking as an example because I did this specifically. I'd do it and then I'd say I don't want to smoke anymore. But what I would say was I want to breathe clean air. I want to be healthy. So my shift in focus was not I don't want to smoke. It was I want to be healthy. And from that, as soon as I went, I want to be healthy. I want to breathe clean air. Um, Immediately I could just stop. How much do you think that focus plays in people actually shifting from an addiction to not having that addiction?
Gosh, I think just that differential, and I never really thought of it through that angle to which you just said about you not necessarily wanting to stop smoking, but you just wanting to be healthier. I really never differentiated, say, those two. It does come across as not nearly as overwhelming as I don't want to smoke.
Mm,
So I just want to thank you for saying that. Um, I think it's a challenge for people, especially when they're currently in their cycle of addiction. Um, and even in the first few days of their sobriety, whether it's from alcohol, drugs, or something else, it could be sex, it could be anger,
mm,
it could be porn, it could be food, it could, any sort of addiction. I would think it would be a bit early to differentiate the two unless you had a really awful last day of your addiction to the point of you wanting to come back from it.
mm,
So, but with the work that you're seeing in the foreground, because this is another thing. I use this analogy about photographs. It's not always about what's in the foreground. It's also what about the background?
mm,
And if you initiate the foreground aspect, which is the work that you need to do
mhm,
to clear your head
mhm,
and not revert back to your old ways, then the chances of that individual and in a healthier mindset actually being able to make that decision would benefit them tremendously. But
mm,
I think it takes time. I think it takes time to do some self work before getting to that because it for a lot of people I would feel that would be a little extreme maybe at
mhm.
first, a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what you really need to do is get those photo bombers out of the background of your images. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yes, pretty much.
Oh, you guys, go away, go away.
Exactly.
And you've talked a lot
Oh.
about, and you've mentioned it a few times in the podcast, but you've talked a lot of, and in the research that I've done, you talk a lot about unconditional love. What
Mm.
does that mean to you? What is unconditional love?
So unconditional love to me is like an acre without, or just a field without a fence. It is literally the entire world in front of you. Um, and so specifically speaking, unconditional love is love you give to somebody no matter what. No matter what may happen to them, no matter what may happen to you personally down the road, perhaps.
Mhm,
And I've learned I've learned that, and this is what one of the main themes in my book. I really want my reader to ask themselves about their unconditional love, right? Where
mm,
even with a mom and a dad having unconditional love for their child,
mhm,
that's fantastic. And that's so commendable and it's moral and it's popular. However, say 20 years down the road, if things get really bad and then that child becomes dependent on you for feeding their habits, whether it's drugs, alcohol, or maybe just being lazy, right?
mm,
Um, then then I don't think that serves its purpose.
mhm,
But unconditional love is you verbally signing an agreement heart to heart saying that no matter what you might do to me, I'm still going to love you the same way.
mm,
And so I really stress the importance of evaluating that for people. I think you can have conditional love. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think for the purpose of self-respect and your self esteem of being safe with yourself, I think it's important to monitor that. And I'm not saying to eliminate unconditional love, and I'm not saying to give up on people failing
Mhm.
more than once at their own recovery. And I wouldn't ever want to say that. But what I am saying is that it's a very big promise that you're making to that person, whether it's in a marriage or your family or your best friends,
Mhm.
that no matter what happens, you're still going to love them the same way. And I just don't, for me personally, having been through what I've been through, I don't see that ever to take place again. I mean, when you get married, I can only imagine it's a beautiful, beautiful moment. You've got butterflies in your stomach. You two go on your honeymoon. You reseal the purpose of you two being together and
Mhm.
revalidate that with each other. And then you might have a great 40, 50 years, but then something may happen down the road. Maybe they become abusive from
Mm.
from from a mistake they made that turns addictive.
Mm.
So it's just about protecting yourself too. And I know that makes me sound shallow, but I assure you, ever since I've been applying it, it's been very beneficial. Just so that I'm all on guard. It's kind of like back in the day when we had software to fight viruses and Trojans and all those crazy computer things that happen. Um, we could get the full suite security package of the
Mm.
program, or we can get the basic. And so, um, you you certainly want the best package to protect your computer and allow you the chance to still connect. And so, with ourselves, with our hearts and souls, especially if you're easily triggered or easily traumatized, I think it's important to list boundaries. And I call it the give to get policy, where you give to someone what you want to give back.
Mm.
And it's not a selfish ambition. It's not a tit for tat. None of those things, but it is a healthy, in my experience, it's just a very healthy place to be.
And I've got to ask the question. You mentioned honeymoon there. Why do you think they call it honeymoon? I read somewhere that it's because it's the first time you see each other's butts. But is that?
Oh wow. I've never heard that before. That's fantastic. I'm brought back to the show The Honeymooners, and there were a lot of characters in that old TV show. Sorry. Now that you said that, um, no, that's interesting. I've never really thought of it. I've always thought of honey as something sweet,
Oh, it's the first time you get
you
the
know.
sweetness as well, I guess. Yeah. I love that.
Sure.
That's awesome.
If you've been a good boy and good girl.
Exactly. Exactly. Tell
you
us
know.
about the book. From what I want to understand is because I'm sure, and coming back to that Wally principle, and you have to watch Crocodile Dundee because you'll laugh your head off and you'll enjoy the references. And as you're watching it, you'll be going, I get that, I get that. There's a famous comment
Yes.
about a knife and stuff like that, and watch how he knows what time of the day it is. It's hilarious.
Oh, for
There's
sure.
little
For
teasers
sure.
for you there.
Thank
Um,
you.
but and so that's one coming back to that Wally principle is we've all got, I think, something to say as well, something to share that we can help people. Talk us through how you went through the process of writing the book. What was it like? I mean, was it what if someone wanted to share their story? What would you guide them to do in getting their book out there?
Oh my gosh. Just gathering your details, jotting down your story, maybe practicing with a best friend as to how you would talk about it with somebody who can really use it. For me personally, I waited about 8 months after T's untimely demise
Mm.
to to start this book, and it really started off with I think they call it here freestyle writing, where whatever your thoughts are, you're typing that.
Hmm.
And I was under such a psychological hold with him when he was alive that um, my reaction to his death was um, it was one of a kind experience. I had gone. I was able to somehow be able to manage to work. I was working at Edible Arrangements at the time,
Mm.
managing the store, and I still, I had to work a few days before it was a holiday, so I really didn't have many options. But after that, I had really sat down with myself. I left town for a few days. I went up to get a hotel room, and I just sat myself down and started typing. And I had so much rage at first. I was using language I've never used before. I was typing up emotional trauma, and a lot of it was choppy. But then I sat back after I felt, I think it was about 6 hours in the dark, writing up at the hotel in Bellevue, Washington, and I just sat back and I was like, you know what? Maybe my story can help other people.
Mm.
So the book idea wasn't really in the works, but then I just thought, well, I have such a turbulent roller coaster ride with him, and that I really want people to hear my story, and it wasn't me wanting to gain attention or having people feel sorry for me with what I went through, although that has been uh, the feedback I've been getting from my circle and friends and family, which I'm so grateful for. But the whole purpose is I think we can feel alone. And when I was with him, currently in the abusive relationship, I felt alone. I felt like I
Mm.
couldn't talk to anybody about it. There were a lot of factors that played. We met at Northwest U in Kirkland, and we were both very religious people, both affiliated with the Assemblies of God Pentecostal movement. And so, being gay was certainly not an option, but we both fell in love with each other, and
Mm.
we kept it very private for as long as we could until we had a whistleblower, which I won't spoil that, but that's in my book as well. Um,
You've just blown the whistle.
I thought I just held it. I guess I did blow it a little, didn't I? um, but but no, I share my insight. I share what I've been through. There were also, I think, a piece of the pie that I also really loved to get into was having him on the other side, having him pass, and for me to be able to still connect with him.
Mm.
And I talk about her in my book. I talk about her to all my friends and family. But Karina Hartman she is one of the most dear ladies that I've ever had the privilege of knowing. And we go back probably about a good 8 or 9 years, and she's a psychic. And everything she has said has come true for me. And she was able to connect with him. And if I may have just a moment to share, during my session with her after his death, she kept stopping in the middle of her reading.
Mm.
And she said that, I'm sorry, I kind of hear him in the background chuckling. And, T had this habit a lot of having this little minute laugh whenever he would be either listening to a conversation or being in a conversation
Mm.
that he felt a little nervous in.
Mm.
And that was his nervous response. And so anyway, so I talk about her in the book. She has Zoom meetings, which is so great. You can actually schedule her for a Zoom meeting.
Mhm.
She's incredible. And but I stress the importance of connecting with loved ones that have crossed over. I'll get reminders from here and there about him visiting me, but that's probably another podcast. I don't want to bore you with the details, but you just know when that happens, when you feel like your loved one, whether it's a family member or a friend, passes away, and you're just hit with their presence, just like a mental "Hey, I'm here" kind of thing.
Mm.
It's very real, and I think it's a really beautiful thing. I really do. So, but yeah, my whole book is themed around just um, question yourself on issuing out unconditional love, but to also just know that if you're in any sort of abusive relationship, whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, that you're not alone, because all of those elements happen to be in my story.
Mm.
And I'm so blessed to have that out for others to see and read.
Awesome. I love that. And I love that you shared that. And also too for the listeners too, because we did touch on earlier, suicide as well. So if people are in that moment where you're feeling that lowness, please reach out to somebody, because
Hmm.
there are people around. There are the Wallies out there, and there's lots of other people that care as well. That they will listen. So if you're feeling it in that dark moment, just reach out to somebody. If they can't help you, no
Yes.
doubt that they'll direct you to someone that can. Justin, it has been fabulous having you on the show. I've loved this conversation. It's been really wonderful. But
Thank you so much.
yeah, you're not over yet. But wait,
For
there's
sure,
more.
for sure.
There's
There's
more.
more. Stand by.
If you're going to sum it up for the listeners, sum up something that you wanted them to take away. Wisdoms, a nutshell. What is it that you would want them to take away from this interview?
That it's okay to be you, that you are loved by people you may not think that love you,
Mhm.
um, and that you can be a better you tomorrow, and that you shouldn't ever wake up one day and say that you've learned it all, because you can be 99 years old and still not learn everything.
Mm.
And I'm a living proof of that. I'm growing every day, and I know many of your listeners are as well. And we're all in this together.
Awesome. I love that. Justin,
Thank
such a
you.
pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much for making the time. It's been wonderful. For the
It's
listeners,
been an
in the
honor.
show notes, you'll have the details of where to get Justin's book if you want to get hold of that, and how to contact Justin if you ever wanted to have a chat with him as well. So, Justin, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Damon.
Thank you for being part of the Share.care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes for others and for you.